The tale you are about to hear is not one for those who seek happiness. It is a tale of dread and woe, one of sadness and terror. Curious happenings are afoot, and if we were to give them away, we would not be better off. In shadow, your fears turn to reality, and the veil of the world unknown is lifted. If you dare to listen further, then heed these words. Do not listen alone in the inky black depths of night. You have been warned. October 31st, 1981. This tale's end took place on that fateful night, many years ago, the date of which is not the date you just heard. All Hallows Eve is just a mere spark of something much bigger, a time in which someone enters a door through which they never should have gone. There is a key to a time that makes no certainty, a bell that tolls that heeds no warning and brings doom with every silence. However, to tell the tale in its entirety, we have to step back to a place of forgotten memories. It had been a cold and rainy day, and Janet had wrapped her coat up tightly around herself. She passed steep piles of newspapers on the roadside and smiled at the paper boy that was fiddling with his bike. She was never sure how he could ride with those things stacked like layered pancakes. Janet passed the old butcher's shop, rows of meat strewn all over the window, making it look more messy than a neat shop window. Thankfully, she was to be out of this town soon enough. The rain passed and the day grew brighter. Janet met her parents at her house, as they had just finished lunch. They were meeting her to help see her off and make sure that she hadn't forgotten anything. Long gone would be the town that was always moaning about the weather and the state of the park. She was looking forward to the fresh country air of Thistleton. They checked all the rooms, with their parents checking the downstairs rooms and Janet whisking in and out of each upstairs room as quickly as she could and mentally checking them off the list. She entered the master bedroom and breathed a sigh of relief. It was all done. Something caught her eye and stooped to pick it up. A key. Not just any standard key, but an ornate one that seemed to be very old. It was odd, since the house only had one key for the front door. There had never been any other key. She pocketed it and was about to stand up when she noticed something else on the floor. A small puddle of something. She sniffed the air, hoping to smell whatever it was, but there was no odour. She gently placed a finger into the puddle, but as soon as her finger touched it, the liquid disappeared, leaving not even a trace of where it was before. Janet took a step back in surprise and jumped. Her dad was standing right beside her. He asked if she was okay, to which she nodded. As they were leaving the room, Janet had the urge to clean her hands, so told her dad she would meet him downstairs. The bathroom was all packed up and nothing was left, other than the wall mirror that resided there when she moved in. It was a unique piece that had come with the property, according to the lady that sold her the place. It then occurred to her that the lady had also said that she may keep the mirror if she so wished to. Strangely, it had only just occurred to her and had not been thought of until that very moment. As she reached for the tap, she thought she heard something and turned around, expecting to see her dad in the doorway, probably wondering where she had gone. Nothing. There was nothing there. Janet went to turn the tap on again, but there it was another time. A strange sound coming from behind her. She turned back, but to her surprise, the door was now closed. With a shiver running down her spine, she tenderly gripped the doorknob and turned. She opened the door and gasped. There, outside the door, was not at all what she expected. It was a very dark street, with only a few dimly lit street lamps on either side. Looming shadows lurked on the left and the right. What she could just make out were houses. There was no other light apart from a very dull glow emanating from the horizon, a very dull orange glow. The glow helped to backlight the houses slightly, or what she thought were houses anyway. It seemed to be the glow of a dawning day, but she could be very much mistaken. Janet was still stood firm in the doorway, unsure of whether to step into this unknown place, or stay in the safety of her bathroom. She decided that it needed exploration. After all, it had appeared for a reason. Janet tentatively placed a foot outside the doorway, still apprehensive. It surely couldn't be real, and yet there she was, foot first in another world. The same sound could be heard again, and she realised what it was. It was the faint sound of what seemed to be the inner mechanical workings of a clock. Not a chime or a clock tick to be heard though, just the cogs and clicks of it running through its usual. As Janet stepped fully onto the street, to her horror, the door she had just stepped through vanished. She had no way to turn back. Looking forward, the road seemed narrow, the street lamps growing dimmer by the second. She took a few steps towards what was the brightest of all the street lamps, under which lay something she could not make out. As she approached, she realised what it was. It was a door, albeit a very ill angle. The closer Janet got to the door, the louder the mechanical clock sound could be heard. Each street lamp started to go out, one by one, leading her to the brighter of them all. The light on the horizon faded too, only to be left with the only light in this realm to be the one with the door. Stepping closer still, Janet had shivers running up and down her spine. She had no idea what to expect. One second, she had been standing in her bathroom washing her hands, about to move house. The next, she was in this strange place with angled doors and whirring cogs. The darkness consumed the already black emptiness around her, and Janet no longer felt alone in the land she was in. She could hear noises all around her in the inky blackness. Something was out there, or some things. Standing at the doorway, not even sure how to enter as there was no handle, Janet froze as she heard a soft knock on the door. Still frozen in fear and having not answered the sound, the knock came again, this time louder. Suddenly, the air was thick with a heavy feeling, and Janet could no longer breathe. Being the only way out, she pulled at the edges of the door, trying to pry it open. All air was being sucked out of existence by some force, and Janet was tearing at the door with the little energy she had left, trying her best to suck in any air left. She would die if she couldn't breathe soon. In desperation, she banged on the door as hard as she could. Suddenly the door flung open with a deafening creak, almost knocking her flying. It was so dark inside, but with nowhere else to go, Janet stumbled in. A flickering light appeared ahead. The door that she had just come through had disappeared, like the other door. She could also finally breathe again. Air had been restored. She filled her lungs with as much oxygen as possible, that she felt she may drown. Lightheaded, Janet made her way towards the flickering light. It was candlelight. As she approached, she noted that the wax had melted down the candle, creating a pool of melted wax at the base. Janet could see nothing else but this one candle. She felt exhausted and wanted to sit down, but there seemed to be nothing around her but an empty space. Just then, another light appeared further ahead. Able to walk faster now, Janet hurried towards the new light. A gas lamp came into view, along with what seemed to be an old street. She emerged from an alleyway onto this main street. The street was lined with old shops that had long since closed down, all of which had very strange names. One shop was named Antique Memoirs, and the entrance was ridden with cobwebs. A few shops had completely unreadable signage. The only other shop that had legible writing read, "The day time stood still." Another of those shivers shot down Janet's back. The sound of what seemed to be a bell could be heard. Not a school bell, nor an alarm bell, but more the sort you would hear at Christmas. It was coming from further up the street. Listening carefully, Janet edged along, her ears straining to figure out the source of the bell ringing. There it was. Right in the centre of the street stood a telephone box, with its inner light flickering through the windows. The difference with this telephone box being that it was not bright red, but orange. Cautiously, Janet stepped up to the door and pulled it, but it didn't open. She didn't know what to do. Exhausted, and with the bell still ringing in her ears, she leant on the door to rest, but the door gave way and opened inwards, revealing what looked like a bookcase filled with an assortment of books. As she moved towards it though, she realised it was in fact a large distant bookshelf she was staring at, and the doorway actually led into a huge library, with books lining every wall. The bell grew louder still, but somehow a less shrill pitch, and to a more manageable tone. As Janet stepped into the library, something moved. She could have sworn it was a book. At least, that's what it had looked like. Moving through the library, Janet couldn't contain her awe. She loved books, and this was the most beautiful room she'd ever seen. Stepping backwards to get a better look at the room, something banged into the back of her head. Whipping around, a book was hovering in her eyeline. Janet shrieked. "It's not to be expected, of course." The book flew across the room and hid behind an ornate glowing globe. Unsure what was happening to her right now, Janet giggled and stepped closer to the hiding book. It peeked out and floated gently into her hands. The title made her mind flip. Helpful Hints for the Universe. It was a wonderful title, but of course it couldn't mean what she thought it could. Could it? At that very moment, she heard something. It was a voice. She recognised it, but she didn't know why. Moving towards the voice, she passed by a few bookcases, only to find what looked like a dead end. Just a dead end with a mirror. Janet's mind whirred. That was her bathroom mirror! Shaking now, she stepped up to the reflective glass, staring at her own reflection. Yet there was something odd about the reflection. It had something there, behind her head. She turned around, but there was nothing there. No, there was definitely something there. Behind her head, in the mirror. It dawned on her what it was. It was her bathroom. She also wasn't sure how, but she could see her mum and dad outside the bathroom door, checking if she was okay. Her bathroom door and wall seemed to be see-through. Panicked, Janet touched the mirror, but nothing happened. Or at least she thought so at first, until she turned to look back at the library and realised she was now staring at her bathroom. She looked at the mirror. It was back to normal. The library had completely disappeared. She came to the conclusion that perhaps she had been dreaming. She had felt very tired from the move. A knock at the door jolted her out of her daze. It was her mum and dad, She rushed to open it, apologising for not answering before. They looked confused, saying they had only just come upstairs and only knocked the once. Even more confused, Janet brushed it over and closed the bathroom door, about to follow them downstairs when she had a thought. She turned back. Outside, all packed up and ready to go, Janet waved goodbye to her parents and left the driveway. Her heart ached from leaving the house and her parents behind, but she knew that it was for the best and that the new home would be a great way to move into the next chapter in her life. Janet blew a kiss to her parents, her mum catching it in her arms as she turned the corner. She beamed, as it was the start of a new beginning. Little did she know, though, that it was, in fact, the start of a very deadly end. As the car drove away from the old house, it watched on as a glint of something shone from the rear window of the car. Something that Janet could not see. It was the mirror, in which a sight of nightmares could be seen. A horrifyingly contorted face. One that isn't a far-off resemblance to that of her own. To be continued. If you thought this tale of terror and mystery was thrilling, let us know, and don't forget to check out our next installment when it comes to a time near you. Stay safe now, and remember, if you ever find a key, make sure you leave it where you found it.